Thank you so much, panelists, for joining us. Thank you, attendees, for joining us. This is the inaugural virtual panel for the Achieve podcast. All three of our panelists have been guests on our show. We were very fortunate for that. And on the show itself, we focus on life journey and the experiences they've gone through that have brought them to where they are today. On these virtual panels, we're going to discuss various topics that our guests, our panelists have been involved with career-wise. And so today we are hosting a topic on technology and mindfulness. And for the benefit of the attendees, I'll just quickly share whom you have in front of you. We've got Max Gomez, an entrepreneur. He's co-founder and CEO of Breathwork. We have David DeJesus, a venture capitalist and partner at VU Venture Partners, and Max Josephson, whom I'll call a technologist, because that sounds like it encompasses somebody who's steeped in programming, but is also coming from a mindfulness tradition, who is Chief Technology Officer of Double Blind. So thank you all for joining. To set the stage a little bit, we kind of know the broad statistics. There are over 1 billion smartphones out there. I've seen some interesting stats about how more people can access smartphones than toilets, although maybe those those open air sewage systems are better for the environment. Who knows? We also know the stats of how addicted we are to our smartphones. We check phones 150 times a day. We spend 10 hours a day on screen time and about 34 minutes with our loved ones. And so these are just common stats that have been going around for a few years. We're now beginning to hear about some of the paradoxes and problems. And so, interestingly, technology has brought us closer to those who are farther away from us, while creating more distance with those close to us. Now, I can't take credit for that one. I heard that, and I don't know to whom I can attribute it, but I did craft the following one with the help of my 14-year-old daughter, which is that technology has made us more efficient, yet we are left with less downtime. Some of the problems that technology has provided include psychological ones. So we're grappling with isolation, decreased social interaction, to physical problems, problems like obesity, shallow breathing, and tech neck, where it seems like we are always praying. So to dive into it, mindfulness has been touted as a way to deal with all kinds of stress in our lives, including as a way to counter the negative impact of technology that we just talked about. Now, most people would argue that the practice of mindfulness, by definition, would mean shutting out technology completely. But as the three of you can attest, there could be a way for technology to play a role in mindfulness. So I'd love to ask you as a first question, what role can technology play in supporting mindfulness? And I'd love for you to talk about some of your personal experiences with respect to that. And so, David, I might ask to kick it off with you. And if you could chat about your experiences, looking at music and its impact on athletes.
Sure. First, thanks, guys, and thank you for having me, Asim. This is awesome. I won't take any credit. I'm also not a clinical person. All the information that I'm going to say as a disclaimer is mostly from the people that I surround myself with that are specialists, and also books that I've taken in. So, but they've also helped me personally as I go about this, as we're all kind of facing the same thing in the technology landscape. But my first exposure to, I guess, this concept of self-awareness and mindfulness is it's as a practice, kind of came in when you start to take on more challenging roles in life, and that includes a career that's really kind of outside of your comfort zone. So that imposter syndrome kicks in, a lot of that depression kicks in, and so the coping mechanisms and things that come along with that picked up along the way. But specifically to the scope of technology, we've seen some awesome things happen. In my personal experience, I've worked with Brandon Larson, who I'll give credit to at the High Performance Gym at Red Bull, who's given me a lot of insight into stress, your belief systems, your self-awareness, and also practices. So one thing that I'd like to pull into this is a lot of it has to do with your belief system, and belief system is kind of a core. Your mindset is another thing that adds to that building block. I would reference a book in this case for everyone's suggestive reading. Kelly McGonigal is author of The Upside of Stress, and also to add to that book is a book called Peak Performance, where I think two doctors, I'll have to remind myself of the authors, but they look at high performing CEOs, high performing athletes, and the core concept there is it's just small little habits that make them different. But it's a heightened self-awareness and a heightened amount of self-belief in your belief system. So those are really core to this. In terms of technology and the practices that you're able to develop with technology, I think that's so super helpful when you already have tuned yourself. You already have developed a self-awareness. A lot of that work comes internally first, and then technology becomes an augmentative tool to a lot of this. So what we've seen, for example, in studies with music as a primer for getting into a mindset shift, is that the athletes have already up to this point trained their self-awareness and are constantly working with coaches and outside influences to develop that internal sense, and then you can augment it with technology. I guess the other part of that is there's not a lot of studies that look into the other part, but I think we're also seeing that there are kind of white papers developing around depression, the other side of technology, right? But I do believe I'm more so on the positive side or the augmentative side, that technology definitely has a big role in pushing that forward. So I'll pause there.
No, that's great. Did you want to spend a few seconds highlighting the work you did in terms of music and its impact?
Yeah. I guess to really highlight it, we raised money toward an innovation project at Red Bull, and it was really interesting because we know that I think there's a general assumption that music does have an impact, via vibration, via its own, its resonance in our bodies. It can be very subjective, but there are some core elements there that can drive human valence. And so valence is what we kind of focused on the most. And there's an emotional components, there's memory components, but mostly it has a lot to do with valence, and whether you're in a positive or a negative state, that pulls us into understanding. There's a few companies I'd like to cite, which are there's a company called Echo's Nest, which was acquired by Spotify, but they did the hard work of fingerprinting almost 52 million songs to develop this this category of whether or not this has energy, this is danceable, this has positive or negative valence. And so we used that, and we thought that was kind of interesting because there's a quantitative metric to it, but we also saw that it was kind of wrong. It was actually very wrong in terms of its analysis and trying to use that against high-level Olympic athletes like Lindsey Vonn. Right. And what we more so gathered is that there's specific people on this planet that have the skill to not only observe an athlete or observe someone in activity, but they can also they also have the recall to actually pull music out of their, whether you call it a
Mental
computer or
library, if
their
you will.
mental library, to make you do something, like to make you move. And those are DJs. And so specifically, you know, that skill, that curation skill set has always been tried. You know, I think technologies has always tried to emulate that skill set. And that skill set, when evolved, can be super powerful. And what I did for this project was I brought on one of my good friends from high school, but he is a DJ for the CrossFit Games and other Olympic athletes and gymnasts and different programs, where he programs music specifically for their performance. So improved performance. So it's a little bit of priming, but also in the act, they can keep tabs. They have this mental kind of memory with the music, and it's tied to him. So we thought we were onto something quite amazing. And I thought it was awesome because it tied really well into the protocols, but we also realized that it's not a scalable, you know, it's not a totally scalable thing just yet until, you know, until AI kicks in and we're just taking over. But yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Max Gomez, when we had our conversation for the podcast, I was very impressed with how at a time when you were contemplating a career in medicine, you worked as an EMT, and it kind of brought into focus the importance of breath. And I think it's phenomenal that you are now co-founder of a firm called Breathwork. So chat about that. And again, the question is, how can technology support mindfulness?
Yeah, interesting. It's funny enough because when I first had the experience with breath was in a more clinical settings, an EMT, learning that and then applying that to patients when meeting them and going into, you know, high stressful situations or situations where people are kind of uncertain and unsure. And one of the first things that they teach you as an EMT is to actually, you get their heart rate. So you could tell very quickly if someone's heart rate's very high, but as you're getting their heart rate, you look at their breathing pattern too. So if they're breathing extremely fast, they're actually not properly oxygenating their body, and they're actually almost kind of suffocating themselves and expelling too much CO2. So the next practice would be giving them an oxygen mask or telling them to breathe slowly and to sit, you know, in a proper position so you can actually use your diaphragm in order to breathe properly. And it was something that I learned 5 years ago when I was working as an EMT. And then I was going through college, I just completely forgot about that. And, you know, I'm like everyone else, I'm always on my phone, I'm always leaning forward. You know, I breathe shallow. And it wasn't until a few years after college where I really started to get into a really anxious state. And some things happened in my life, which led me to a therapist. And one of the first things he noticed was he's like, hey, like, you're not breathing right. You're breathing very shallow. And let's just teach you how to breathe properly as one of the ways to help alleviate this anxiety you've been experiencing. And it was, you know, in that experience of learning how to breathe properly when I realized, like, oh, this is, you know, I can't believe I forgot about this. This is something so simple, something so easy that we all have access to. And it was in that point where, you know, I always grew up with the phone. So I'm always thinking technology first. So my first thing was, is there anyone who has made something that could help guide me through breathing? And I think that's one big thing that we could use technology for in the mindfulness category is to help have a guidance system to help you get through these things. I think a huge discovery point, you know, not everyone has access to a therapist. So a huge discovery point is through online, through videos, through YouTube, through brands, and, you know, even social media. So people need an access point to discover what they can do in order to help improve themselves. You know, I was very fortunate enough to have a therapist in the clinical setting teach me through these exercises, but I think many people lack access to that. So technology does play an important role in helping you discover these things. And, you know, it's all about finding what works for you out there. I think it's a little bit tough right now when there's just so much content on the internet and there's so much content overload. It's almost, you don't know who to trust anymore. And in a way, technology has the dark side of it being too engulfing and too kind of stimulating and actually attributing to more stress and more anxiety. Especially, you know, with always the news of always something crazy happening or terrible happening. We're always in these highly anxious states. But having something that can help you guide you through these anxious states and to help you check in on yourself, I think is really important. And I know Josephson talks about this too. He, is thinking about integrating of wearables into mindfulness, so you could actually track, heart rate changes or heart rate variability changes or skin conductivity changes, and then be proactive in how technology can help you be more mindful. So if your heart rate increases and you're actually sitting down in a chair or at work, you can send some vibrational patterns to either breathe to, or a reminder to go and meditate, or to have a step back and have a different thought. And I think that's where technology can play a really important role in helping get these people out of these stressful mindsets that technology also puts them in at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that, Max. Could you also spend a few seconds talking about how your app does more than just remind people to breathe? Like, there's a functionality there around breath that is particularly meaningful, because there are some naysayers that say, okay, I get it,
Mm-hmm.
breathe more deeply, but
Mm-hmm.
share about how technology can be much more supportive than just a notification.
Yeah, so with breathing, humans are really, so one big thing with breathing is knowing the correct timing of breathing, how to inhale, how to exhale, where to inhale, so breathe with your diaphragm, and then staying with it for a duration of time. So one of the biggest problems that humans have is we have a terrible way of measuring time in our mind. So if you're in a good mood, flies by. If you're in a bad mood, time takes forever. So when you're in a stressful situation and you need to know the breathing pattern and the way to breathe, it's really helpful to be guided and cued through it. And what we do with our platform is we have visuals, so very simple circles that move in and out, and they're not overly stimulating, because I believe we live in an overly stimulated world. Then we have sound to accompany that, and also vibrations on top of that. So having that full experience really helps guide and keep you within the breathing pattern, within the process of it, and to really fully benefit from it, you have to stick with it. And I think it's pretty interesting, because I think other mindfulness practices, sometimes like meditation, it seems counterintuitive to have a person guiding you through it, or to be on your phone, which is the whole idea, is to get away from it. But with something like breathing, it is important to really do it properly and to really check in and to be guided through it, because you need to be doing it right the whole entire time. It's not just, you can't wander off on it. So I think that's
Yeah.
where it comes into play.
Great, thank you. Max Josephson, you've done a tremendous amount of programming work in this arena. You've had experiences with Spire, with Apple, with Magic Leap. And you were the one who really highlighted to me the issue that when people are sitting in front of their screens, they can go up to a minute without breathing, and then suddenly have this shock, almost traumatic experience reaction to come back to it. So tell us how, in your view, can technology support mindfulness?
Well, I would first like to, give it a take with technology and mindfulness, which is that maybe just 10 years ago, you would, if you're meditating, if you're learning how to meditate, your practice is very much about how can you use that to be more mindful in the 99% of your day when you're not meditating. And today, what is that 99%? But that 99% is a lot of it, most of it is on the screen. So I would actually say that the kind of like one of the things the Buddha said is that you want to teach somebody meditation so that in the context of their life. And our lives right now are very much technology centric. So I think that there's a lot of benefit to really wisely using technology and getting off of it at times too. And I start every morning without technology. But I would say that, as far as mindfulness and technology, it's really the mindfulness practice is now entering a world where it's being experienced on technology. So I think it's actually a lot less counterintuitive today than it maybe was even just a short time ago. And I think that one of the shifts, there's many shifts happening with technology, and as David was saying, he was saying that it's really important to kind of know your belief system, know yourself, so that you can know how to use the technology and not have it use you. There's this great phrase, which is program or be programmed, which is basically if you're not setting up your own, just it's not just your life, but also your technology, then you're going to fall into basically marketing and somebody else's marketing. And it may not be the most auspicious people. And so I definitely think that giving the technology is a double-edged sword, but that I really have a lot of faith that mindfulness can inject not just great experiences in technology, but can actually shape the base level of using technology. I'm really interested in technology that can run in the background while you're using a computer, such as Apple's new screen time for the iPhone is a great example of that, something that is working for you against maybe some of the dark patterns in the human psyche, like getting addicted to little oxytocin rushes from the likes or something like that, or not being able to set something down. And so I think that there's a lot of great tools that are just starting to be possible, and where mindfulness can be part of the experience of the technology itself, apart from just an app that where you're dedicating some time to learn meditation. And so I think that as far as mindfulness goes, a lot of people don't have very much experience with meditation, and that's changing pretty quickly. But even so, I'm really hoping that tools like breath work and Insight Timer and Headspace can kind of give somebody an entry to mindfulness. One of the things that I also work with is psychedelics. I'm the CTO of Double Blind, which is a magazine and website that talks about using psychedelics to create a belief, to help your belief system change to something be more positive, and also to help you integrate experiences like meditation into your life, and kind of get a touch of what it can be like to be outside of the kind of normal process of your mind. And I think that technology has a lot of promises for that, and that's probably one of the reasons why I am more of an optimist with technology than a lot of people, because even though it's causing a lot of problems, I think that it's hard to fathom where we could be in 30 years with like Neuralink having our brain waves and really setting off a revolution in mental health.
Wow. Well, and psychedelics, of course, give us the old school technology that doesn't rely on any screen time at all. Max, Josephson, we're gonna stay with you. You brought up Apple and kind of what they're doing to limit the amount of screen time. And so that raises a very interesting question, because it feels like there are maybe 50 to 100 designers and developers at 3 tech companies, Apple, Google, and Facebook, all of whom are in front of Congress, interestingly enough, testifying, not on this issue, but on other issues, antitrust mostly. And so the question is, like, we're really in their hands. Apple's taken a step here to because they're all vying for our attention, and the more of our attention they can get, the better they're going to do financially. But here's Apple taking a step that's kind of counter to that. Where do you think the responsibility lies? Does the responsibility lie with the companies that are bringing us these kinds of technologies, or is it with the individual?
Well, I definitely think that the companies do have a big responsibility, but as individuals, we're definitely gaining more. Why we're at least being more knowledgeable about how our technology affects us negatively. So companies like Apple are kind of going a little bit ahead of the game and helping us be empowered to make choices with our technology that will help us lead the life that we want. And I don't think that I think that Apple's very wise, and they realize that, you know, there's a certain level of attention where just capturing attention is a good thing, but then there's also capturing somebody's attention where they're feeling good. And even if you're feeling good and you're spending less time on the technology, it's actually a great thing to have technology that you don't have to interact with as much. Like, good technology should be as either invisible or non-intrusive as possible.
Right.
So I think that really the responsibility is in both, and I think that Apple is trying to because they're not getting money from advertising, they have a real more incentives to try to put a more holistic product, and so that's pretty cool, and that's one of the reasons why I'm more of an Apple fan personally.
Gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
appreciate that. Max Gomez, same question to you. These big tech companies, is a responsibility on them and their designers and developers? Do they have the onus, or is it the individual to seek out companies like yours or others that are being more supportive of mindfulness?
Yeah, I think with these big companies, I think everyone's also just understanding what the effects are of these phones we have on us. I mean, if you take a look around when you're walking around and replace people's phones with cigarettes, you really see, like in your mind, so visually replace people's phones with cigarettes, you really see the problem that arises and the addiction that we all have with our phones, like impulsively checking, when you're checking out at the grocery store, everyone's on their phone. We can't just be without it. And I think we're all still understanding what the repercussions and effects are of that. So it's hard to tell who should be responsible, but I think there exists a level of just responsibility for these companies to just be open and transparent with what their products can potentially do, and like how to use it less potentially. So with food labels, if everything else we ingest, like we have food labels that tell us the nutritional ingredients on the back of them, and I think some of the devices we have and some of the products we use should really tell us, this can be addicting. If you have used it for over 8 hours a day, you should stop. And I think that's like where the responsibility lies, is just the transparency of the product and telling people, when is too much, and, what could be the negative repercussions of using this product, I think is something that should be more transparent with these things. Yeah. A great example of where I saw this was TikTok. If you scroll on TikTok, which TikTok is made to be very, very addicting. You scroll on TikTok for over, I think, 45 minutes or an hour. This ad from TikTok pops up and it's like, hey, you've been scrolling for a while now. Like, put your phone down. These videos will still be here in an hour. Take a break, get some fresh air, get some sun, and then you could come back another day or in a couple hours from now. And I think that was something that was very socially responsible of them, because they understand that it can be so addicting and so consuming to be invested in these products. And it's just really nice to see that people are taking action like that. And I think there will be more action of that over time. Yeah. I mean, I don't think everyone's evil. I don't think Google's evil. I don't think these companies are evil. I think obviously, A, they're trying to make money, but B, they just want to do something that helps empower people. And I think, like Max said before, it's like I think the best technology, like you said, is to get people away from their phones. So it adds to the life you're living and not is the life itself. Right. And I think technology that empowers you to live your life and not technology that is your life, it should be the route we should go down.
Yeah, well done. I really like that metaphor of big tobacco. And of course, there were years of not taking responsibility, and then through government intervention that changed. And now Philip Morris runs a site that helps with smoking cessation. Yeah. So there's obviously big progress that's been made there. David, how do you feel on this subject? Should the big tech companies play a role in helping us with mindfulness and technology?
I think so if I could just frame it in a few ways, mm-hmm. And I'll reference a couple things. One is, I think that if you go back a little bit in history and look at some of the designers that came out with the phones, or at least helped to design this new generation of phones. You know, it's funny because it was a satirical but also serious article about somewhat of a regret because their children are now 100% on these phones. But the other side of that is, you know, technology is moving at an incredible rate, especially now being in the venture capital side of things. We get exposed to things that are much more faster than we can assume what they are. For example, you know, on the AI space or machine learning space, it's moving incredibly fast. Technology is picking up so quickly that, you know, some of the challenges are philosophically are that we don't have great thinkers being able to disseminate information about, you know, digital usage and a modern day philosophy. It'll probably be a little bit more reflective or reactive, just kind of like, you know, we can read Michel Foucault today and then imagine what it was like in his day, but him writing on the topic at the moment probably was a little bit out of context. So that's to frame the speed in which technology is moving. From the political and social responsibility perspective, that's the addition, because policy can't be written fast enough to think that far ahead. But I can definitely guarantee you that you know, the information, there's information groups and agencies that are part of our U.S. government that are VCs as well. So they're exposed. They understand this technology. So In-Q-Tel was one of the first investors in Google, and it's the CIA. So they understand this at a significant level that is pretty interesting to really think about. The economical framing of this is also very interesting, because economically, these are the biggest drivers that have driven our economy, and you know, we're in an interesting time where everyone can have an abundance of resources at the palm of their hands, and economically, it's changed the world for many people. So there's so many. I feel like there's so many bigger benefits in the realm of technology, but if we're to really break it down to this discomfort, this weird feeling that we get because we're not really in control of our behaviors, again, it really comes down to our personal abilities to, you know, have self-awareness, have you know, really do a lot of that work. It's a lot of work to put into to develop that internally. And then also as parents, for example, and that's another framing really quickly, is that we're birthing digital natives. And I think when I was a kid, I was told that, you know, playing video games will rot your brain or otherwise. I think there's been some, you know, significant developments in what, you know, bigger benefits there are in gaming, and we're still sort of seeing that come alive. I think that we can't judge. I think it's difficult for us to particularly judge, because if your child or if your little human is showing some type of skill set in an area that makes you feel a little uncomfortable, you should actually, I would actually suggest that you explore it, see what that is, see where that discomfort comes from if they are watching their phone, you know, more often than they're active physically. There's an interesting component to that, and it's also a parent's responsibility to do that. So if we were to just talk about responsibility in general, I don't think it's the government's job per se to do that. I think it's our job to kind of track and keep ourselves accountable to ourselves. I also think that technology, these big technology companies, do have somewhat of a responsibility, because they design thinking and design, you know, philosophy is always evolving. So I think we've kind of come a little bit full loop for a feedback loop for that, and now we can kind of be a little bit smarter about the future of design.
Okay. I appreciate that. That's great. We'll stay with you, David, for this next question. Max Gomez talked about TikTok and having this ad that comes in 45 minutes, and um, they're the founder of Time Well Spent, named Tristan Harris. He's written this article that's frequently referenced, which basically talks about the ways in which we're made addicts for technology. He calls it how we get hijacked, how our attention gets hijacked. And he lists a bunch of these, one being variable reward, which is what slot machines rely on. So we're grabbing our phone. Did we get a message? Did we get a response? We don't know what the reward's going to be, but we're constantly looking. Limiting the menu options, limiting what we have available, what we can do with it, is another form of sort of control. And then we're not doing the things that otherwise we would want to. Fear of missing out, social validation, and social reciprocity. So, having identified a few of the reasons why we become addicted, is there a way we can turn those on its head and use that, sort of use our those factors, our sort of our psychology, in a way that's helpful to us, in a way that leverages and does something that's more mindful based?
Yeah, and this is hard to prescribe as a blanket statement, and I don't come from a clinical perspective, but I do have a lot of invested time, reading, like social economics, even my own psychology as an investor, and I think a lot of it has to do with kind of creating better suggestive, means at first, so that the entry point needs to be very much more suggestive in teaching. And I think he has a great point. Obviously, if you haven't had the time, and I can imagine myself as a 17, 18-year-old with not the emotional and, maturity to really handle myself. I'd imagine this is very, very impactful. And not having all the tools necessary, the mental tools to really deal with it. It takes time. Like, it does take time. So I do recognize that there is a very vulnerable population at this point. And, in order to really help that, it takes like conversations like this, I think very suggestive conversations, to kind of keep the population well informed about the dangers of going that route. But I also recommend everyone to read Daniel Kahneman and say, and it's Thinking Fast and Slow, and really understanding where your synapses actually sit. Are you more of a reactive type of person, or are you kind of a slower thinker, where it takes a little bit of time for you to ingest things and think about them, and then really compare that to maybe some patterns that you've had in life. I also recommend I'm going to do a little plug here, but a good friend and a startup that I'm advising is called Go Brick, or Brick. My friend Tommy Sobel offers an education course on removing yourself from your phone. So he does events that are phone free, dinners that are phone free, things that pull you off the screen on purpose. But his philosophy is really, deep in there, because he explained himself. He was a young professional, was addicted to his phone, recognized the addiction, and then did something about it. Nice. You have to recognize that addiction, have an intervention. And if we were to take the clinical perspective, with all the drug rehab programs out there, the best ones that are successful are the ones that help you realize your self-awareness first, and then help you develop that tool along the way, rather than saying, rather than the hyper intervention, which is like the 28-day program. It's like, those interventions matter. It has to be incrementally helpful. But if it's a cold turkey type of environment, it's probably it's most likely not going to work. So it takes time. It takes self-awareness. But the other part of it is, if they're going to change, if a person's going to change, it takes a huge effort. It's a heavy, heavy lift. But once you pass that heavy lift, and they make an effort and mentally to change, it's huge. It's a big thing for a human to do that.
That's
So
great.
yeah, I do agree. I think there's a big population that definitely needs a lot of this information that we're talking about.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And a great reference to Kahneman. He's a psychologist I really admire. Max Josephson, you quoted Buddha earlier and talked about how meditation should be where we are, and about sort of passive approaches to mindfulness. Do you think there's scope to also use our psychology in a way that gets us to become addicted to mindfulness practices as opposed to technology or social media?
Yeah, so I think that people are coming into this from many different places. People that maybe have a knowledge about meditation but are curious on integrating it with their technology. People that know very little bit about meditation and maybe are using mindfulness when really maybe they should be focusing on their sleep first, or other things. Like, I don't think that meditation per se is a cure-all for everybody, and I think that it's very important to know the different aspects of your lifestyle that are impacting you. um, and and I think that one of the most important things with mindfulness and technology is actually just figuring out what websites, what apps you're spending your time on, and is that really how you want to be spending your life, and is that really driving you, pushing you forward? And that takes an incredible amount of self-awareness. And I think that meditation definitely helps with your self-awareness, along with maybe going to therapy, journaling, getting good sleep. And I'm also think that giving people tools with technology that will help them make choices is really key. And you might wonder, well, they already have choices. They're choosing to go to these different websites and do these different things, but we only have so much ability to make decisions throughout the day. Like, decision fatigue is a real big thing. Addiction's a real big thing. And so we really want to be able to enable technology to augment what we want to do and have a clear picture of what we want to do. And I think those are some of the big challenges as far as how we are going to enable people and to live really fully in this time and place.
Max Gomez, I'll come back to you. You did highlight the TikTok example, but wondering, can we use the psychology of addiction to, and there are some of those aspects you've adopted in your app. So maybe talk about what features that you've used there that have typically been used to get us more addicted to screen time.
Yeah, I think you touched on some of those good points. Like, there's people who are definitely more susceptible and vulnerable to becoming more addicted to these things, especially a younger population, as your brain's still developing. It's not until you're 25 years old where your prefrontal cortex is actually fully developed. And, changing a behavior after 25 is really tough. So I think just having more of a empathetic understanding of children and their usage of these apps is going to be really important to understand. And with what we do with our app, we were 18 years old plus, but it's not, we still have children using the app, but we kind of don't advertise ourselves to younger people because we want to be cautious of that. Yeah. But with what we do and what we tend to gamify it. So we're gamifying the experience to make it more sticky and addicting. But we think in terms of we're doing something that's kind of for the greater good. So if you're telling people to be more conscious of their breathing, to use these steps to control your body and control your mind, we think that it's actually more beneficial to, have these little triggers in there that gets them into this practice more and more often. Because when I set out to create breathwork and the company around breathing, I needed it myself. I wasn't getting these reminders. I wasn't getting guided through these sessions. And I found so much benefit in creating the product for myself, and then saw that other people found the benefit in that too. And I'm only 24 years old, so I'm definitely way more susceptible to instant media and gamification and stuff. And I needed something like that to kind of to keep me into that and keep me intrigued in that, because my whole world growing up was just so much constant stimulation from everywhere.
Yeah.
So certain mindfulness practices can be dissuading from people because they're actually not entertaining, they're not sticky, you don't feel like you're progressing through it. So I was really cautious in making this product to make it more sticky, more entertaining, to help you feel more engaged with it. And then also Max Josephine brought up the point where technology should empower your life and not be your life before. And that's the goal with what we're creating too. Like, we're trying to get people to use these exercises when you need them and to empower your life so you can go do what you're going to do next and not spend all your time doing it or using it. But it is important to get people to build good habits, and making it fun and easy to build good habits, I think, is really important too. I mean, that's why 30-day challenges work so well for gyms and yoga studios, because you get people in, you have something to work for. And that's one great trigger that really works for people and for behavior. But I think there's definitely, other technology out there that's used for the bad. So they take that, addictiveness and gamification of things. And then, like you're saying before, with like Instagram or TikTok, they use the slot machine approach, where it's like every now and then you get a big hit of an amazing piece of content, and then you go back to something boring, and then builds you back up again. And it's that stuff that's can be detrimental over time. But yeah, I think, there can be certain aspects of product and consumer behavior, and that can be beneficial. And I think in the mindfulness space, it can be beneficial if it's used properly. And it's something that I'm very cautious of and hyper aware of. And I don't want to have people using my app for 10 hours a day.
Right.
Definitely want them to use it when they need it and to build a daily practice with it.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. We've had a few questions come in from the participants, and one that a few have been asking, and I'm going to augment it a little bit. But the question is, which technology platforms have you utilized to practice mindfulness? I'm going to add which ones that are not of your own creation or involvement. So, Max, you go first. What are other apps are you using?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess where I started a couple of years ago is I tried to meditate with the meditation apps, but found meditation to be pretty tough for me, as most people with active minds can empathize with that. Meditation takes a lot of practice and time, and just sitting there for 20 minutes feels almost like a waste of time because you have all these amazing thoughts you want to write down.
Right.
But so like that kind of failed with me. But another one I use is Apple Watch has a breathing app too, which we're actually just kind of going back to what we're doing, but we're actually making an Apple Watch app too, but these just have this simple exercise I like to use also. I think that's a really good place for mindfulness too. And then YouTube has great videos online to learn different practices. And I think that's a really amazing educational platform.
Of the meditation apps that you used, was there one in particular that stood out for you? Or
No, because I haven't subscribed to them for that long.
okay.
So when they first came out, I think like everyone else, we downloaded it and we saw the positive benefits of meditation.
Yeah.
But it's really tough to get people to do anything and to build a practice and to take that self-care into consideration. So that's why it is kind of like you do need a little bit of that extra push in order to get people to do these things. Changing behaviors is tough, especially the older you get, the less likely you are to change behavior.
True. Yeah, absolutely. David, how about you? What mindfulness apps do you rely on?
Well, I think for a time I was downloading a lot of mood-based apps just to really understand, what were the triggers to log your mood. I think any like diary logging is pretty great to help you do kind of a post analysis on yourself. Again, though, it's augmentative. It's not it's not going to change your behavior by any means. You have to commit to it. These are all commitment type things. But I think the one that, the only app, and I guess one of the main apps I use is Audible. So it's the only way that I suck in information at 3x times the speed. So,
Right.
I think that helps me the most, actually, to really be honest, because you can, take in that, I can take in the information. Obviously, everyone's different. I can take in that information very quickly, and then also modify behavior based on what I'm seeing. So any type of tracking applications, any type of historical tracking, that always helps. In the high performance space, we have more clinical wearables that we use. There's one called BioVotion, and that also tracks your heart rate, breathing, and your senses a little bit better than the watch does. But apparently, Apple Watch is like sensor 3 now, so version 4, so pretty similar. But those are mostly for tracking. Oh, also, I think if anyone's trying to get into this now, regards to breathing, in regards to apps, get an app that helps or that measures your sleep. Not helps you sleep, but measures your sleep. In order, in that book I mentioned earlier, in terms of for mindfulness, for stress, for relieving burnout. Burnout is a case for chronic stress. Stress is good when it's in certain doses, but if it's chronic and over time, that's when it causes burnout. But a really good solution to burnout in general is just multiple days of good sleep. And
Right.
and sleep, it sounds so weird to kind of like say something so obvious, but people don't mindfully sleep.
That's true.
So
That's a big problem. No, I appreciate that. That's great. They asked what mindfulness apps do our panelists use, and I added to that, which mindfulness apps that is not of your own creation or involvement.
So the mindfulness apps that is not in my own creation or involvement is I use breathwork sometimes. I think it's a great thing to do before meetings, actually.
Oh, nice.
Um,
Did you do it before our panel?
the pre-game one specifically, because it really slows down your breath. And no, I didn't do it before my panel, but I've been using it a lot lately. And I use Insight Timer a lot just to give me interval bells. I practice several different types of meditation, and some of them I like to be timed. I use just the normal timer on my Apple Watch to time meditations. I use Headspace for sleep to help me go to sleep. I can fall asleep so quickly with the guided sleep meditation on Headspace.
Gotcha.
And then I use a lot of my own apps, such as haptic feedback for breathing on my Apple Watch, and using the microphone for my computer, picking out the sound of my breath to give me some feedback of the breath on my computer, either with audio or visually while I'm working. I use a little app I made to kind of start to slowly shut off my screen if I've been on the computer for a long time, to take a break. And timers for the Pomodoro technique, which is uses the thinking fast and thinking slow kind of viewpoint of there's different types of focused work and more diffuse work. They're kind of analogous to the thinking fast and slow. And a lot of our most creative thinking happens when we are not focusing on the kind of tasks that we think are going to be benefiting our life, like the writing a song in the shower, for instance, or like the DNA double helix was thought of while someone was driving.
Right. No, those are excellent points, and look forward to you commercializing that app that gauges your breathing through the microphone. I think that's a great idea. Looks like we have time. Maybe just one more question from the audience. We talked about the responsibility, or whether there was responsibility by the big tech companies that are developing our attention-grabbing apps or technology. There are a handful of employers who have begun to adopt mindfulness programs, and so it's what they're offering to their employees. So the question is, do you think that employers should assume responsibility, or should it really be the individual? So Max Gomez, why don't we start with you there?
Yeah, I mean, I think employers should care about their employees. So yeah, I do think that there should be some type of responsibility between that. But if you want to look at the more objective view of it, by caring about your employees and providing with mindfulness practices or applications, you're also helping improve their performance and work week. So it also comes back to serve the employer themselves too. So yeah, I think that employers should always care about their employees and should always help benefit them. I mean, that's why most employers offer health insurance and dental benefits,
Right.
and retirement packages. But
Absolutely.
I think, when it comes to the mental wellness space, I think that's definitely a new space that not everyone's comfortable with or understands yet completely. But I think over time it'll be way more adopted into employers offering these benefits to their employees.
Yeah, great. No, I appreciate that. David, how do you come out on this?
Yeah, I agree with Max Gomez. I think, but I do know that from kind of the business and enterprise perspective, there has been a lot of pushback. Although this theory of this theme is becoming a little bit more popular, the challenges are proving hard ROI. Just like the the statement that Max just made, though, is like, yeah, they're going to pay attention. They should take care of their employees. However, it's still a soft ROI when you really consider it, because there's not enough, there's not enough proof points yet to say that if we dedicated, this much money of your HSA account toward this, it kind of gets into the weeds about, policy and what works for this point. But it proves, for the teams that can kind of work those things out and become kind of a group flow. Yes, that's an amazing team to be part of. But again, it kind of falls into the insurance component, the policy component, hard ROIs versus soft ROIs. There's a good handful of companies that we've tried to push through to, certain investments, and it's just been difficult to really prove those proof points. And so I'd be excited once the studies do come out and really have some, harder quantified numbers on ROI,
Right.
on all these things. But yeah, it's still not yet there, but
Okay.
they should definitely consider it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. How about you, Max Josephson? Should employers be responsible for their employees' mindfulness?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think that they have a responsibility to employees' mental health that, like, a lot of employers just aren't considering very much. And I know, like, in Japan, um, every employer that has more than, I think, 50 employees, they have to give a mental health screener every year to their employees.
Oh, yes.
And I think here in America, we have this ideology, like, work hard, play hard, where there's like these separate self at work that can just take uh, all this, like, abuse basically, and then you come back at your life and you're just kind of dealing with it. And I think that we need to be thinking about different mentalities for what is work, what is play, and how can we be enjoying the things that we're doing. And one of them being, I'm thinking about, my brother works for Meraki, which is a Cisco subsidiary, and there's meditation rooms on every floor of this 5-story building in San Francisco, and there's nobody ever in the meditation rooms. And I haven't seen one person there, and I've been there a lot of times. And so I definitely think that employers have a responsibility to get their employees to think about how these things could be benefiting their life, and so that they can be the ones taking initiative and incorporating it with their sense of self, so that they could really be using these tools effectively and not just it being another thing I have to do during the day.
Yeah, perfect.
Can I add something to that, though? I think it's also interesting to kind of jump into that, but we're at 2:00 already. But the thing is, I think we've also discovered that, there's you can kind of put people in several camps in terms of the way they think about themselves. So I think the majority of people actually enjoy, or at least don't know otherwise, for something that's prescribed to them. So you need something prescribed to you. They're not going to, actively look for alternatives. And there's a high, fallacy of trust with our care system. So the other, there's so many components to really explain that. I think my general feeling is, yes, of course, employers feel, employers should take care of their employees. But, there's a lot of really interesting things happening in our care systems, in our society, that are generally creating a lot of individualistic kind of feelings and notions. But I think there's a lot of, we can delve into that. But I guess what I'm saying is that's a very scary thing for people who are just looking for prescribed things.
Right.
And what I mean by that is there's actually a smaller portion of people who will proactively look for alternatives. And right now, mental health is an alternative rather than a primary, right? So we're looking for, we need to do a better job at putting mental health as a primary. And that's the job of practitioners and people that are really driving this forward. And so at the same time too, if you're prescribed something at a therapy level, or you're taking a pill, or you're taking, something, you're still entrusting someone else to give something to you based on that trust.
Right.
And I think that needs to kind of expand a little bit wider is I guess what I'm saying.
I think there's a lot of focus on physical fitness, and so it'll be great if we move to a paradigm of mental fitness or mental wellness from a preventative standpoint, and not just diagnose problems or issues or medicate after the fact. So on that note, we will have to end. I want to thank all of our panelists for their wonderful insight and for taking the time to share that with us today. Thank you to all the attendees. Appreciate the insightful questions. This made it a very robust event. I'm really just full of gratitude for everyone involved. Thank you so much. Achieve is recorded at Subtractive in Hangar 8 at the Santa Monica Airport. Music is produced by Hennedy.